This video is about an ellipse. So in this video, we're going to graph an ellipse given an equation and write the equation of an ellipse given a graph. So before we start graphing, we need to understand how we write the equation of an ellipse. So the equation of ellipse is quantity x minus h over the radius of x squared plus y minus k over the radius of y squared equals 1. Notice, unlike a circle, an ellipse is always going to be equal to 1. So in this equation, our center, we're going to pull out h and k. Because they're minus signs in the equation, we always pull out the opposite, so h and k would be positive in this case. Now, in an ellipse, there are two types of radius. There is an x radius, and there is a y radius. The x and y radius change what the ellipse is going to look like. So if your x radius is larger, so if the x radius is larger, then we're going to have an ellipse that is longer going side to side. And if your y radius is greater, then we're going to have a taller ellipse going up and down. C stands for the focal radius. This is how we measure and draw in our ellipse using both of our radii. So a focal radius can be found two ways. If the r radius is greater than the y radius, c is equal to the square root of the x radius squared minus the y radius squared. If ry is larger than rx, then c is found by the square root of the y radius squared minus the r radius squared. So whichever radius is larger, that's when we're going to square first and then subtract the other one being squared from it. To find your points of your focus or foci, if r is greater, we're going to have h plus c comma k and h minus c comma k. So if rx is greater, we're going to be adding and subtracting the focal radius from our x coordinate. If ry is greater, then we are going to have h comma k plus the focal radii and h comma k minus the focal radii. So if ry is greater, then our y coordinate is going to change to find our focal radii locations. So let's look at a graph and try to graph our ellipse. So in number 1, we want to graph the equation. So in this case, our center, when we pull out our numbers, remember we're going to pull out the opposite sign. So our center is at -3, 2. Our x radius is 5. Our y radius is 3. Now, major and minor axis. Your major axis is always the larger of the two. So in this case, it's going to be our x-axis, and our minor would be our y-axis. We are basing this off of our x radius and y radius. So if I'm going to do the Pythagorean theorem to find my focal radii, a and b values are just going to help me find my focal radii. So a value is going to be the larger radius, and b value is going to be the smaller radius. So my focal radii of c is equal to 5 squared minus 3 squared, and I take the square root of that. So I get the square root of 16, which is 4, which means my c value is 4. To find my focal radii, because my x is larger, I'm going to be adding and subtracting from my x coordinate of the center. So we would have -3 plus 4, comma 2, which gets us a point of 1, 2, and -3 minus the focal radii of 4, comma 2, which is -7, 2. So to graph my ellipse, then what I'm going to do first is I'm going to graph my center point. So my center point is at negative 3, 2. So I'm going to go to negative 3, 2. This is my center. With my x and y radii, my x radius is going to help me go left and right from my center point. So I'm going to go 5 to the left and 5 to the right. My r radius helps me go up or down, so I'm going to go up 3 and down 3. And then I can connect these 4 points to form an ellipse. The last thing I have to do is plot my foci. So I'm going to go to this point 1, 2, place a dot, and negative 7, 2, and place a dot. Now my graph of an ellipse is complete. So let's try one more example of graphing given an equation. So in number 2, based on the information they gave us, I'm going to take out the opposite sign. So my center is at 6, negative 3. My r radius is what we're dividing the x minus 6 by. So my r radius is 2. My y radius is 4. So in this case, because the r radius is larger, my y axis will be my major axis and my x axis will be my minor axis. So what I'm doing to find my c value, my a is 4 and my b is 2. So to find my square root, 4 squared minus 2 squared gets me the square root of 12. And we need to put this in decimal form, rounding to the nearest hundredth. So we get 3.46. So my focal radius is 3.46. Now, because my RY is larger, this time I'm going to add and subtract the focal radius from the y coordinate. So I'd have 6 comma negative 3 plus 3.46 and 6 comma negative 3 minus 3.46. So my focal radii are located at 6.46 and 6 comma negative 6.46. So now I can graph my ellipse. So when I graph my ellipse, first I'm going to start with the center. So I'm going to go to 6, negative 3, place my center. My x radius is 2, so I'm going to go 2 to the left and 2 to the right. And my y radius is 4, so I'm going to go up 4 and down 4. Now I can use those 4 points to form my ellipse. The last thing I have to do when graphing my ellipse is graph my focal radii. So I have one at 6 comma 0.46. So I don't know exactly where the decimal is, so I'm just going to estimate somewhere between 0 and 1. And then for the other one, somewhere between negative 6 and negative 7, with the x coordinate being 6 for both. Now let's go the opposite direction. You're going to be given a graph and you need to write the equation of the ellipse. So we need 3 pieces of information in order to write our equation. We need to know the center. So I'm going to look at where my 2 points would intersect to form my center. So my center is at 5, 5. Then I'm going to look at the x radius. So how far from the center to a point left or right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So I went 4 to the right. So my r radius is 4. My y radius is how much I go up or down from the center. So I'm going to count one direction, up 1, 2, 3. So my r radius is 3. So to write the equation of my ellipse then, I would have x minus my x coordinate 5 over the x radius, which is 4, squared, plus y minus 5 over 3 squared equals 1. Remember, your equation of an ellipse is always equal to 1. Let's try one more example. So first I'm going to figure out where my 2 axes will meet to form the center. So in this case, my center is at negative 3, 3. My x radius, how far did I go left or right? So I went right 2. My y radius, how much did I go up or down? In this case, I went up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when I write my equation, I would have x plus 3. Remember, your equation always needs the opposite sign. Over 2 squared plus y minus 3 over 5 squared equals 1.